All right. Hi, folks. So I know we've been battling it out with Christmas company Christmas parties tonight. There's a lot of them. So thank you for being with us. This is definitely the better choice. Thank you to the people who are online as well. We're going to get started with a few minutes of delay. We're waiting for people to arrive. So today we're going to be talking about status. We're going to be talking about how you can basically manage your status for your component library in Storybook. We're going to talk about how we can bring Figma status data into Storybook automatically with integrations. And we'll talk about how you can handle deprecation and basically the status of the content that you have in production in the wild as a component library maintainer. So yeah, pretty cool topics. We're very happy to be hosted by Algolia today. So we'll give them a few minutes to introduce themselves and say a few introduction words. So please welcome Daya.
Hi everyone. Hi everyone online, I guess, as well. We are very glad to host the Storybook meetup in Paris. And just a few words about Algolia. We are a company that provides a service to empowers customers to create their own search and discovery experience. That entails an API that customers can reach out to and connect to index their data and then retrieve the results based on customer queries. We provide a lot of helpful additions to that, as well as AI capabilities to provide recommendations and personalizations for that as well. We also have a few JavaScript, Swift clients to connect to the API, as well as UI components that use, for some of them, Storybook to centralize all of the UI decisions and props. Otherwise, still happy to host a meetup here. If in the audience you are part of another meetup group and you want and you need a place to host, we are happy to do that as well. You can reach out to us. Have a nice evening, and I'm gonna give the mic back to Steve.
All right. So let's kick it off. I think everybody in the room knows what Storybook is, right? It's the documentation platform for UI components. And according to the JavaScript developer survey, there's something like 40 to 50% of JavaScript developers using Storybook, so it's a pretty big product. And very often we tend to focus on that documentation aspect, right? So you write stories which are basically live previews of your component with specific properties that you've set. And the UI allows you to explore the stories, allows you to hone in on specific stories with a search feature. And it allows you to also do a little bit more. You can edit a story in real time. You can see how it changes. And while starting from Storybook 8, you can even save the stories that you've edited as new stories. So you can basically use the UI as a way to have a better editing experience for your documentation. And this is a thing that's going to come up a bit again tonight. What people don't know about as much is Storybook is also the testing platform for UI components. Maybe about a year and a half ago, Storybook introduced interactive stories. So you can write these stories that basically have an initial state for your component, and you can emulate user interactions like clicks and typing, and you can see how the component changes and reacts. And in doing that for your documentation, you can also run the stories in Jest or Vitus, so you can use them basically as tests as well. And starting with Storybook 8.4, we're introducing the ability to run the tests directly from the Storybook user interface. And the reason we're doing that is because it gives you, again, this live feedback on what you're doing in a product that is interactive. Having the UI with you means that you can explore your test results within Storybook. You also can hone in on content again. So we all are used to basically focus on the fading tests when we write tests in frontend. These are usually the ones that we're interested in. You can do that in Storybook as well. And the thing that's new, the benefit that's brought up by UI is you can visualize exactly when your tests are fading. You can play them step by step, and you can see exactly what's happening, and you can debug with a UI. So this is why it's a platform for UI testing. And what we're going to talk about tonight is the use of Storybook as a platform for component library metadata management. And once again, we're going to hopefully convince you that it's the right tool to define your metadata, but also to explore it, to hone in on the metadata that you're defining. And you might be wondering first, why do we have metadata in the library? And there's a lot of it, actually. You don't necessarily realize it at the first glance, but we all have a lot of it. So versioning, the way that you version your components, the way that you define that something is new, that something is experimental, that something is outdated or deprecated. You might want to tell your consumers that you have specific features or integrations that are supported with some of your components. You might want to tell them that a component is intended for a specific user audience, or you might want to basically, boast that you pass some QA metric and that you have great code coverage or great accessibility compliance. So you want to show that, and that's metadata. And Storybook has a solution for it. It's not very well known, but for any component that you have, any story that you have, or any documentation page that you have, you can define tags. And tags are probably a very good solution for metadata because they're very flexible and lightweight. It's just text. So you can just plaster this text on your components, on your stories, and you can define any text that you want. And based on that, you can build any workflow that matches your organization's need for metadata. The thing that's nice about doing it in Storybook is Storybook is part of your code base. You have your Storybook instance sitting next to your code, you have your documentation sitting next to your code, and that means that your metadata that you define in Storybook is in your code base, and it's versioned, and you can branch, and you can make sure that you update it as you update your code. So you don't have a separate process for communicating the metadata of your content, because it's sitting with the content and is being edited, written, and reviewed, and merged and deployed with the content. And one thing that we'll talk about tonight is that we can actually even programmatically edit these tags that we put in Storybook. So you can build your own integrations to basically fetch data from another source of truth and provide it all in your documentation for your developers. The thing that maybe is not the biggest or the most noticed announcement for Storybook 8.4, but the thing that I'm very interested about and very excited to present today is that we're giving tags a UI presence in Storybook. So starting 8.4, you can now explore the tags that you've defined in the form of sidebar badges and badges that you can see somewhere else in the UI. And you can also hone in on specific tags. You can create these views of your data with tag filtering in the sidebar. So the way tag filtering works is that within the sidebar, you have a search bar that you can use to search for components. There's a new button that's been added, and you can select the tags that you're interested in, and you can focus only on that content. And that might be useful if you have a large Storybook instance, for instance. You might want, as a maintainer, to identify content that is new, content that is experimental, content that is outdated, because you want to basically see if you have any actions to take. You might have other teams providing QA information, and you might want to see what components are in need of a review. If you're a consumer of a design system, you might be in a situation where only part of a design system's components are relevant to you. For instance, if you're working on conversion funnels or landing pages, maybe you want components that are heavily branded for editorial UIs. If you're a back office engineer, then maybe you want these components that are designed to handle tax-free pricing for B2B applications or more dense layout components. So this can be useful as well for you as a consumer to focus on what's relevant to you. I'm clicking too fast, apologies. We're also introducing a new add-on called Tag Badges. Tag Badges allows you to take these tags that we've been defining in the UI and put them in your UI, in your Storybook UI, and you can define any badge that you want. The way that it works is you're building these configurations where you choose a bunch of tags, and for any tags that you've chosen to match, you're going to display a badge, and I'm going to show you many examples of that, and you can choose where you want it displayed in Storybook. And this is how we can build, already in the add-on, we've built a few default behaviors. So we provide badges for versions, we provide badges for new, experimental, release candidate, or outdated content. We provide a danger badge. Essentially that's what it does. We provide badges also for things like components that only exist in code, which is a very common situation, right? And it's always useful to highlight these. And I'm now going to show you a few examples of the workflows that you could build. So say, for instance, you work in a large company with a back office and a front office. Maybe you have a few users or clients that are government or medical, and you have a specific regulations that you need to apply. For instance, with government, you need to make sure that you are compliant with accessibility regulations. With medical applications, you might want to make sure that any data display components like tables don't do any rounding up of numbers. Maybe you need to have a proper accurate reporting of data. So you want to ensure that you highlight which components support which audiences. We're going to have this configuration that you can see on the side of the screen. The way that it works is you're going to match tags. So we support things like regular expressions. You can choose to match with a prefix and a suffix. And then we're going to provide a badge function that describes what we render in the UI. And what's interesting here is the badge function is dynamic. We can retrieve the content of a tag to display it. So that means that we can build like nice little emoji representations if we want. And we can pass on a text, and we can add a tooltip to our badge if we want to. We can also match by suffix. Say you have a bunch of different teams that do reviews on your content. Maybe you have a content team. Maybe you have a QA team that does some end-to-end testing. Maybe your brand team is really intent on reviewing all those editorial components, and they want to make sure that it's up to a standard. You might have an accessibility specialist. Very often this is outsourced. So you could build an integration that allows these people to basically provide the pass or fail data in Jira or in any other tool that you like, and you could pass that data onto your Storybook instance. And that allows your front-end developers to start using a component as soon as it's developed, even though it might still need a bit of refining. But instead of having product owners and product managers chase that data through our ticket systems, you can bring it into Storybook so that everybody is aware of what they're using and what it supports at the time that they're using it. Another example of things that might be useful for component library offers, maybe not just design systems. You might have a component library that relies on an authentication stack, on a cache or database or local storage system that is present in your app. And these are things that you can communicate so that when people use your component, they know, for instance, in a React stack, they know which context providers they need to implement and to call before they use the component. So this is once again a dynamic configuration function. You could also have maybe composition patterns. Maybe you have, say you build your cards with a composition. You have composition components for titles, headers, footers, and whatnot. And it can be a bit cumbersome as a front-end developer to find all the elements that you can use when you compose. So this is a piece of information that you can provide as tags. You could do the same for dialogues and forms, and you could have general composition components for, say, layouts, like boxes and grids. And being able to highlight them and focus on them at the moment when you're building your composition, it helps you find the components that you need quicker. There's also another concept that is quite interesting, introduced by Brad Frost, called smart components, that basically is, I would say, variants or specializations of a component that are designed to integrate with a specific backend or API middleware. For instance, if you're building a React form, you might want your form to interact with a Redux store or maybe with a remix action. And this is also something that you can highlight in your content. You can highlight that you have a specific variant for a specific backend. And then when you have teams that use different technologies in your organization, that can help them get to work faster and identify what they have that is already built in for their specific application context. And of course, you can have your own workflows. So this is fully extensible. You can build your own rules. You can go as far as you want in terms of defining your own tags, your own metadata. And Storybook is going to continue to improve the UI and tooling that we provide around tags. So if you need support with the add-on, with Storybook, get in touch with me. And we're also very curious to see what kinds of workflows people end up implementing. So we've had a few people bring up completely unexpected topics in our issues already, and it's always fantastic, so do get in touch. And we're also curious to hear from people who end up using the add-on, using the tag filters, where else would you like this to go? So we have a few things that we want to build, but we'd be curious to hear how else we can support this this type of usage in Storybook. So do get in touch. And of course, if you want to help us build it, on the right side of your screen, you have this little QR code. Feel free to scan it. And yep, we'll be here to onboard you. All right. Thank you. Do we have any questions? Shy audience.
Hi, thank you. I think it's very interesting how many applications we can have of this simple tag. Is it possible for some tag to have access, by example, to the actual status or the output of some plugins? I was thinking about the one about the status of the accessibility. Is it possible on build time to run some test and to access the result of the outcome of the test? Or is it maybe something you need to do like asynchronously? You run the test and then you add the tag dynamically?
I think we're going to teach you how to do that in the next talk, in some sense, not exactly. So I'm still going to answer the question. You can, when you launch a Storybook instance, there's a way that you can add tags at that time. So you can edit the tags at that time. You can edit the tags a bit later as well, but it's a bit more difficult. But generally speaking, you can run any kind of analysis that you want or need. You can do it as you run Storybook. You can do it before running Storybook as well. And you can edit your tags that way. Right. Regarding test results, this one gets asked a lot. They are provided directly in the Storybook UI now. So accessibility tests are also going to be reported in the UI as test outcomes.
Thanks.
Any other questions? All right, Pierre-Yves, you're up.
Thanks, Steve. Hey everyone, I'm Pierre-Yves. Actually, design system tech lead for France Télévisions, which is the main public TV in France. I'll be talking about synchronise component status between Figma and Storybook, which I will answer a lot of questions, I think. But first, I'll introduce our stuff, our work, and the Galaxy. What's the Galaxy in our context? It's our design system. It's named Galaxy, and it's composed of 3 main products. Outremer, which is the main media for French offices, France Info, which is the first news website in France, and of course France TV, which streams live TV and TV shows and movies. That's for the products, but for the tech, for the stuff we are talking here, we can identify 7 stacks at least. It's complex. We got a lot of platforms to support, like Next.js, SvelteKit, SwiftUI, and all others. We got 13 plus token builds to support. It's a lot. We have a lot of teams we work with, and as a team, we are 8 full-time members. So knowing there's a lot of data going through the process, going through the team, we can ask ourselves, Houston, do we have a problem? Is there a problem? Maybe not a problem, but a bit of misunderstanding. As a team building design component, we face challenges. It's difficult to handle all this stuff, all the teams, all the work we have to do. We are 2 engineers and all others are design system designers. And the challenges we face are like, we have to avoid the ambiguity in the life cycle of components. The platform, the products needs to know where the component is in its life. We have to avoid the limited traceability. What's the story of the component? What's its life? Who edited the component? We have to manage the system, help team build the product, build their lifetime, and the workflow that goes with it. And of course, there's a lack of synchronization between tools. We all know that Figma is a design tool, and Storybook, take one. They aren't meant to be working together, which means to manual processes. And manual processes and misaligned tools leads to frustration and inefficiency across teams. It's written. Let me tell you a story not so long ago in a galaxy not so far away. There was a team going through every merge request, pull request. Takes a lot of time to handle all these process. We are going to all the new components created. It's really difficult to handle the mental load. It's slow iterations. We have difficulty handling simultaneous changes. If an engineer going through the development of a component and the designer changes the component at the same time, it's difficult. It's completely an error-prone manual process. It impacts directly the quality and the delivery. We end with different statuses in Figma and in Storybook at the same time for the same component. So it's difficult for either the designer or the developer to identify the single source of truth, also known as SST. Here we can identify two pictures. One is a button in a completed status, and one is a button in the stable button. We can see they are meant to be the same, but we have to think it's the same, which means outdated specs leads to some difficulties. Outdated designs in Storybook. Developers working with old specs, which means they don't have the latest button, they don't have the latest button API, which means if the button is evolved, we have to redevelop the page who calls the button, which means we got frustration and of course it causes delays. But how to fix it? How to make it easier? What if Figma updates Storybook? It would be easier. For it, we'll have to streamline workflows by defining a source of truth and automating the status update. First, we'll have to define Figma as an SST. We'll have to extract metadata from Figma, and I'll answer the question, with the REST API, and inject this data into Storybook for real-time updates. What are the benefits of it? We can talk about unified language across teams. If somebody has the same language, talk the same word, we all understand each other. So the developer has the same amount of information as the designer and the maybe stakeholder. We have the better visibility on development needs, which means we can prevent the project to have delays and go longer than previously. Sorry, I don't know the word. But lifecycle management for components, which means we know at this time what the component means and where is it in its life cycle. Is it ready to dev? Is it stable? Can I use it? And of course, I can enrich component with my custom metadata, which specific to my organization. We can see here, compare the two workflows. Before, we have manual updates that can cause error and delays, and teams working in silo. with updated information, complex or prone, mental loading. After, with a consistent, accurate, and the accurate component statuses. A better collaboration, if we all talk the same language, we all understand each other, and as we talk the same language, it's easier to take a decision. But it's really beautiful on the paper. How do we build it? Let's discover it, step by step. First, where to store the metadata. Let's use what already exists, Figma Dev Mode. It has an amazing built-in support, or a familiar and well-known interface known by developers and designers, and it has standardized metadata fields, like the development status of the component. But how about my own metadata? Where do I put them? We have to create a custom metadata component to store all the data that can't be handled by Figma Dev Mode. Here is one. You can see it. And what's inside? I have maybe a category of it. Here, my classification, it's an action, maybe a feedback or something else. I can know now if my company is deprecated. The name of it, standardized name, and the version, which is really important because I don't want to version my file in Figma, but my component. And of course, your own metadata for your organization. That would give us a couple of components here. Here are two examples. The button, which is in version 1.2.3, an action, and a tag, which is in version 1.0. From now, how do we extract the metadata to put it in Storybook? We'd have to use a custom script we developed at France Télévisions to transform all the data in Figma through Figma REST API and write it as a JSON file. Here we can see I have my button 1.3, which is in dev status completed, and my tag 1.0. How does it work? Every component in our Figma files are stored in page. One page means one component. And we go with the scripts across all pages. If my page is a component, no, so I'll go to the next one and so on. If yes, I'll fetch the data from the metadata component and also from the Figma component, which is really useful because it handles all the Figma Dev Mode metadata. I'll merge it and write it to JSON, and we'll continue till there's no page left to finish the file. We have to run the script. Several options, GitLab CI to run it automatically. That's the solution we have at France Télévisions. It goes through processes and runs automatically. Manually, of course, it's a script, so we can handle it manually. The best solution would be Figma Webhooks, because let's imagine a world where a designer updates a component, save the file is updated, webhook is triggered, and the component is updated. Live stream. Sorry, I don't have to. How about Storybook? As Steve presented before, we have now the ability to present badges and use tags. So from the data, I have the ability to compute tags for our component. We can add components, and somehow automatically add them and compute them to know if my component is deprecated. I can add the tag deprecated. If my component is outdated. Imagine my version is higher than the component version. That's the story version. I know that I got a mismatch, so I need to tell the user there's a problem. That's the tech part. I'll be brief and try to keep as easy as it is. We're using experimental indexers to inject Figma data into our stories. It's an experimental still in Storybook, but you can find it in the docs. We'll see it later. And how do we do it? Let's dive into the tech. We have a function here, and the experimental indexers API let us go through every indexer previously created by Storybook, get its output. So I can get every story that has been created, that has been read by Storybook, and somehow update it. At this point, it's up to us to add our logic. Here, I can see, I need to see if it's a story, and I've got a version mismatch. I want to tag the version mismatch, so I just add the tag. If it's deprecated, I add the tag deprecated. It's as easy as it is. But you can see more at the Storybook docs. Let's get back to our examples to illustrate the practical workflow. I get the button and the tag, and we all know that design system evolves. They live through times. So somehow a designer updates my button and the tag. So now my button in 1.3 has a hover state. That's nice. And sadly, my tag has been deprecated, which translates by the JSON, which is updated, the new version, the new dev status, and of course, the tag has been deprecated. Storybook is already updated, so I can see that my button needs revision and my tag is deprecated. Oops, I've gone too far. That's it. That's how we do it. It's automatic. It's easy to set up, and that's great. But can we go further? How can we go further? How about component listing? I have all the data I need to list all my components. So let's do it. Even further, how about automatic stories generation? I know here I got a new component, which is the card, but I don't have any card in my stories, so how about I create it automatically? Maybe add a link to Figma component, and we have no limit. We still can go farther. We have all the data we need. We have all the data we can provide. So how about data analysis? Ability to track every state of every component. Oversee design system evolution. Tracking version. We have to keep track of every component changelog. Have a story that display every changes of every component. And of course, in integration with task management, like Jira or Trello, new story, new component, new ticket in Jira. The possibilities are endless. To conclude, we've seen we need unified communication. It reduces friction between teams. We have to speak the same language. Figma is not meant to work natively with Storybook. Let's make it work. Automating, it's automating stink. Sorry, it saves time and minimizes error. So it reduces friction between teams. Metadata can scale. Of course, we can add every information we can have, we can need. Maybe, I don't know, accessibility guidelines, usage guidelines, brand, all the stuff we can think about. And of course, and the most important thing, teams gain trust in design system that works. If we have up-to-date information, stability through time, and a single source of truth, which is maybe the most difficult to have, we have one. So let's continue. Just to talk a bit about me, I am a daft of two. I'm a freelance, working with Clevermind right now, tech lead, design system at France Télévisions, and you can find me on any social media, all the stuff. Thanks a lot for listening to me. And maybe you have some questions. Whoa.
Thank you. So you talked about Figma webbooks, I think, earlier, and that you don't use it in France Télévisions.
Yep.
So why is that?
The main problem using Figma webbooks would be the access to triggering the script, because the script is behind GitLab. GitLab is behind the VPN, so Figma webbooks can't access GitLab. So that's a problem. That's why we use GitLab CI instead of Figma webbooks. But we'd love to use Figma webbooks.
Is there a possibility that Storybook or Figma will ever make or want to make a plugin that officially supports Figma to make the link?
Maybe not Storybook directly, but whomever would be capable of it should do it.
Okay.
Hey, I have a question. So to begin, I'm a designer. I'm not a developer, so maybe my question is dumb.
No.
To begin, as you talk about going further at a point, can't we completely automatize the updates on a component, meaning the visual part of it, meaning each time a designer update component and then push the library, can a script linked to all these new capabilities could automate the updates on the code side?
If I understand, you on each iteration of library publication, you would trigger the script to update the Storybook side?
Exactly, updating all the stories directly on Storybook, and then updating all the visual attributes, meaning, to take an example, I have a button, the background is red, finally on the new version it's blue and it has a corner radius. Is it possible to automate these kind of visual updates directly with this kind of methodology?
That would be the work of a web developer.
Yeah.
Maybe in the next few years, yeah. But
Okay.
right now it's difficult. But
Thank
we
you.
have all the information. If we can go further, we can assume that Figma, we talk about Figma, it has the developer mode, we have the dev status, right? It also has props. I know my button has size. It has some size, maybe some variance. It can have so many props. We could transfer all these props to the story, to the component, to maybe initiate a component creation automatically, maybe in a few years.
I was more thinking about the update of a component than the fact to create directly the code of the component. Meaning the developer has already built the first story, and then when the component is updated, then the sync directly updates the different, maybe via the variables, maybe via another way, but I have my answer.
Yeah.
Thanks very much.
That would be maybe some evolution.
Can I complete on top of that? Because yeah, I'm also a designer after 3 years without coding. So I would like to understand the how behind it. Because like you showed that you parse the page, okay. But and also you talked about before about the dev mode. So I don't know if you do the connections with the dev mode status, for example, like ready to dev or etc. Or even the properties that are available on the dev mode as well. So how literally you take the metadatas from Figma to compose with the data that you need, because just to complete, otherwise I feel that there is a manual part of that, like a manual part for updating, for example, some datas on Figma part. So maybe you are going to need a designer for that.
Of course.
Like, okay, and then and then how you treat the data on Storybook is mainly it's a developer hands-on. So could you come back on the how? Yeah.
The how is here. I have all this algorithm, which is not so detailed, but I've got Figma here. It does pages. Each page is a component. I have one page for the button, one page for the tag. Is my page a component? Doesn't care about it. Let's go. Here, I'd fetch the metadata component. The data from the metadata component I presented just earlier here, which has my category, is my component deprecated, the name, the version, and all the metadata I need. If I get back...
The metadata, how is created? Like it's just Figma who sends you the information?
This one?
Yeah.
It's a Figma component. So I can ask Figma through the REST API, technically, to give me all the properties it has. So here, just basically properties.
Okay.
My category is a list. Deprecated is a Boolean, and the name and the version is a text.
Yeah, but for example, the is deprecated is some properties that the designer has already defined on the component.
The designer hasn't defined the component. I did. This is a component I created.
You created, okay.
As a tech as I am. This is my component. Every designer, every design system designer I work with uses in its own component page. So that's why here I have the couples. This component go with this component, and this one go with this one. This is not the component, how to say it, the product designer will use. Okay. This one, he won't use this component. He will use the button here. So with the couple, I'm able to fetch first the metadata from the metadata component, which handle he holds the version, the name, the classification, and all the stuff, and all other metadata directly from the Figma component. All the props, the dev status, is it ready to dev, or all the rest, and leads us to here the translation to JSON.
Now I get it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think it's almost same kind of question, is how the designer can add metadata to a component from within Figma UI. When he's on a component, is there a plugin or something to define, by example, I guess the system of the number of the version is something that is maybe human defined, or it's completely automatic. At least the deprecation is something that human can define or should define. How is it attached to the component, like inside the UI?
Right now, the component is just a bunch of text and Boolean. Nothing is automated. Just it's aided with the component the designer creates. So just right now it's fixed. So we could think about a plugin to make it evolve, but right now it's just sufficient for France Télévisions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Pierre. To arrive at this result, what is your biggest difficulty you encountered in this project?
Maybe creating the component in Figma, because I'm not a designer, you know. No, just thinking about the process, why we do it, but there's not so much difficulty with Storybook 8.4 and the new add-on with the badges and all the stuff. We can now seamlessly add the tags to the stories. The main problem we could have would be that the experimental indexa API still stays experimental. So please, Storybook, maybe. That would be the main issue. Except this, no, it's okay.
Thank
you. I do have a question. Do you have one as well? No, go ahead. All right. It was very interesting talk. Thank you. Do you think, and it might also depend on the people you work for, do you think this can reach a state where it can be a lot of conventions and something that you can build a blueprint for people to implement on their own? Or do you have too many France Television specific language in here that can't be extracted from the process?
No, I dream of it. Sorry. It could, of course, be useful to so many people. So right now, it's only for France Télévisions, and we'll see what happens next.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the experimental indexer API. So it's experimental because it's not been very long time, and it's such a critical API in a sense. It can enable so many workflows, but it needs to be designed right. And the fact that it's called experimental is basically saying, look, if you have a really good use case where it needs to change, then let's talk about it. And well, I've changed it a lot already. There's a chance that it changes in Storybook 9. There's little chance that it changes in Storybook 8 with a minor version change, even though it's experimental. Yeah, there's somebody asking, like, how can we build this kind of things into like something more elaborate? Will Storybook and Figma collaborate on it? The Storybook product focus at the moment is more on testing. It's not on building integrations. But community initiatives are always very well supported by the core team, and it's definitely something that you can come and contribute to, and it will help you if you need to have some help in building it.
Thank you, Steve.
And I think with that, it's Julien's time to shine.
Okay. So, thank you. I'll let Julien.
So, 3 fingers, right? Yeah. All right. Hi, everyone. So my name is Julien. I'm the tech lead of the design system at Orange. So Orange is an international telecommunications company. and I work a lot on open source stuff on my spare time. So I'm a core team member at Bootstrap, and I also have side projects like open resource and more recently the advent of open source even. So yeah, just a question for the audience and maybe for the chat. Who had to deal with complex migrations of major versions in the room? Probably a lot of you, right? I can see a lot of hands raised. So yeah, upgrading frameworks and libraries is never as simple as it looks. So let's get back to semantic versioning really quickly. So 3 digits separated by dots. We got the major version for the breaking changes. We got the minor version for the new features, hopefully non-breaking. We got the patch version. Bug fixes, documentation typos, etc. Still non-breaking. Easy, right? But it's not always that simple. And I'm going to show you one Bootstrap example for that. So you can see on the screen a simplified version of what Bootstrap is. So even for developer designers, it's easy to understand. We have some kind of semantic token. So for the color, we got a $primary in SAS that is set to blue. So we got a primary token, a color that is blue. Then we have a component token for the button, let's say, for the background. So we have $BTN-BG primary, which is set to $primary. So it is a reference. So it's still blue. And then we define some classes to be used by developers in the HTML DOM. So here we have a class that is BTN primary, and we set the background color to the variable we defined previously. So background color is set to $BTN BG primary. So everything, all of that to just say that a button is blue. Okay, on the user side, it's rather easy. You're creating a DOM element, an HTML element, so a button, not a div, please, not a div. So a button which gonna use a BTN primary class to have a primary button that is blue. So you can see the rendering, it's the basic rendering of a browser, and we just set the background color to blue. So this is basically how Bootstrap works. And also all the design system, you got semantic token, component token, etc. So basic stuff, okay? So it works like that. So let's say now at some point we got an issue in Bootstrap that we need to fix right away, okay? It's critical, we need to find a solution. So this is not a real change, but I'm gonna explain something with this example. So don't ask me why, but we need absolutely in SAS to define a function that is change opacity. So the first parameter is the color, the second parameter is the opacity set to 1. So basically it does pretty much nothing. And we absolutely have to change the affectation of the BTN-BG primary to use this function. So I'm gonna call the change opacity function, and I'm gonna send the parameter primary. So basically, it's still blue. I just call an internal function, and that's the fix we need to do absolutely for the next release of Bootstrap. I don't know why, but that's the case. So just internal stuff. If I'm a basic user, basic usage, I'm gonna use my button with the class BTN primary. Same rendering, non-breaking, that's perfect, that's cool. Then we have some users that needs to customize a Bootstrap, because this is the point of Bootstrap. You need to customize the colors, right? So they will override the $primary color. They're gonna set it to red because they want a more aggressive color for that button. I don't know why, but they can do that. So they override this variable, and then they recompile everything, and the button with the class BTN primary is going to be red, so it works. We haven't broken anything. And then you have this kind of users. You have this kind of users who wants to customize the primary color, but this time with custom property, right? It's possible. It worked before our patch. So they're going to define a custom property at the root level. Let's say DS primary for design system primary. The color is red. They're going to set $primary to this custom property, and then it won't work. It won't work because our new internal function, the change opacity, it calls RGBA, which doesn't support custom property. So the color will be undefined. So the end result is that the button is transparent. So this is a breaking change. We made just a patch So it's really cool for most people, it's mandatory, but it's broken for some people. Actually, if I summarize, it's not breaking for more than 95% of people using Bootstrap, maybe more. And it's breaking for only less than 5% of the people using Bootstrap. And it was a patch. So what do you do then? Is it a major because it's breaking? Is it a minor because we have a new SAS function that can be used, so it is still something new? Or is it really a patch version because it patches something? So that's tricky. But what if all your modifications in your library, in your framework are like that? Because that's the case in Bootstrap. Every time you're changing some SAS variables, some custom properties, some CSS rules over there, it's going to break something for someone at some point. So do we stay with the minor version 0 forever, like Hugo with the 0.139 version? Do we only have major version? Maybe we would have Bootstrap 324. I don't have the solution, but that's tricky because every time we touch something, it can be breaking, right? So imagine maintaining a library with thousands or maybe millions of users where every change is a potential landmine. Some users want rapid innovation, so change every week, new releases, etc., etc. And then you have others, maybe sometimes big companies, they want absolute stability for 2, 3, 4 years. So how can you end up that? And obviously, everyone uses your library differently. So in the end, it's a question, a little bit provocative, but do version numbers really matter in the end? I mean, I've been asking myself this question a lot while I'm handling Bootstrap. I mean, are version numbers really that important? What truly matters for me as a user, finally, is the migration process, how I'm going to start from a version A to go to version B. I don't care about the numbers. And what if a tool automatically migrates your code? Is it still important to have these numbers? I don't know. But we have a role as maintainers of big libraries, libraries of components in design system, etc. One of these roles is to balance the innovation, rapid iteration, rapid features, releases, etc. And we want also stability because at Bootstrap we release each and every 2 or 3 years. So the major versions, we don't have so many. So we need to provide tools for smoother migrations in the end for everyone. So we got some tools. We got the famous changelog. So the changelog, what it is, it's a grocery list. You have a commit message. You have a reference to an issue or pull request. So for the users, it's a bit hard, a bit tough. And we got a GitHub release. It's basically the same. Sometimes it's empty on some open source projects. Sometimes it's exactly the same as the changelog content. Sometimes it's a bit better, that's cool, but that's not really user-friendly for doing a migration. And then what you can do, you can have migration guidelines, you know, in your documentation to allow people to switch from a big major version to another one. That's really better because you can work with your community, you can create a good migration guide. But you know, nobody reads the documentation. So you can create tools to spot breaking changes. That's better. You can create scripts that you can run locally for your project while you're migrating to spot the breaking changes. You can also have maybe IDE extension. I don't know. You can do pretty much anything that spot breaking changes. That's always better than a migration guide. And then when you're awesome, you can create tools to spot and fix the breaking changes. So you can have automated migrations tools like you can have in Angular with the ng update, in Storybook with the npx Storybook latest upgrade, something like that. That's really cool to that's really cool to have that because then you can trust the library. It's gonna update automatically, etc. And I have an example for that. You know. On my side, I maintain a lot of projects. Some of them are using Storybook. Some of them are in maintenance mode. And I can tell you, whenever Storybook releases a new version with a lot of new features for this project, I don't care about the new features. I just want it to run like before. So having an automated migration tool is really, really important for me. And I have another personality. I like to have the fancy new features for other projects. So that's really cool to have the new releases as well. So you can see two contexts, two kinds of expectation, still one people. So, however, automated migration tools are not always perfect. Can be costly to create, can be costly to maintain, are hard to craft really. Sometimes in certain technologies, if you want to make that tool, that's really tough, okay? And especially when your core team is small. You know, at Bootstrap we are not that much. We are all working in our spare time, so we clearly don't have time to create automated migration tools. We should, that's our duty, but we don't have time, okay? So the life of the maintainers on their spare time can be a bit tough, because you on your spare time you're gonna read the issues and so the discussions. You're gonna review the pull request, create your pull request for your own features, so you don't have time to create tools, etc. And you do that, repeat again. And sometimes you need to breathe. You need to, you're not a robot, you're not a machine. So you need to explore, you need to experiment, you need to have fun with some new ideas, okay? So one day I stumbled upon a GitHub discussion mentioning an idea about a browser extension highlighting removed and deprecated classes in websites. So back then I was streaming, so I was always looking for ideas, fun ideas for me and for the viewers. So it was the perfect match, because it's not that complicated to do, and it can be really useful for the users, for the end users. So I've created this project that you can find on GitHub. It's basically a browser extension highlighting Bootstrap deprecated classes and removed classes in websites, okay? So it looks like that. It's a bit ugly, because I'm not a designer. So on the right top corner, you have a basic form. It's a form with 3 checkboxes. So you have Bootstrap 3, 4, and 5. It's easy. When you're gonna check the Bootstrap 4 box, what it's gonna do, it's gonna look for in the page all the HTML elements that uses classes that have been removed in the latest version of Bootstrap. So that's what you can see in the screenshot with the thick red borders. Okay, so that's the deprecated classes, and then I can add also the name of that class, so it can be useful as a developer to know what is not to be used anymore. And we have the same thing for Bootstrap 5. It's in yellow because it's deprecated and not yet removed. It's going to be removed in Bootstrap 6, maybe in 4 years. I don't know. So yeah, it's going to be removed. So that's important to have that difference, okay? So how the extension works. You'll see it's pretty easy. We're going to fetch the latest Bootstrap version, the CSS files. So we got one big file for Bootstrap 4, one big file for Bootstrap 5, okay? So we got everything, all the CSS inside of it. And then we're going to parse this file. We're going to find the classes. We're going to order them alphabetically. So we have all the classes of Bootstrap 4, all the classes of Bootstrap 5 in a JSON file. And then we're going to remove the common one because we don't care about them. And we're going to generate a new JSON file listing removed classes for Bootstrap 4. Okay, so that's the classes we're gonna highlight in the website. So we're gonna loop over this array to have all the classes one by one. We're gonna create a supra class that is Bootstrap browser extension BS with a number, so it is 4. And inside of it, we're gonna add a rule per class you want to highlight in a website. So here you have the arrow, which is deprecated, removed. We set a border 5 pixels solid red, and then we use the pseudo element before and the content property in order to display the name. You remember you had the name in the brownish area in the interface. So that's pretty naive approach. Maybe you can do better, but it works, so that's good. And each time we click on a checkbox in the form on the top right corner, we just inject the class in the DOM, in the page, so that every time you check or unchecked, you apply the class or you remove the class, and it's gonna highlight everything, okay? So that's pretty basic. So this extension is quite useful while you are migrating from Bootstrap 4 to Bootstrap 5. Just a parenthesis, at Orange, we are using Bootstrap because we are a fork of Bootstrap for our web framework. So it means that most deprecated and removed classes in Bootstrap 4 to 5, we got exactly the same issue at Orange. So there is a usage I didn't expect when I created this extension. It's that it is, for me, a design system audit tool, because I can spy on Orange websites. I can see if they migrated to the latest version just by using the extension in internal website, external website. I can see everything, and I don't need the source code because it works directly into production. And even if there is some JavaScript involved, etc., I can see everything. So here's the rendering of orange.fr. And I can see they have still not migrated to the latest version. That's normal, I knew it, but it's really fun to browse all the websites of your company and see if they are aware of the latest version. You can contact them, you can do some really good stuff when you're in the design team. And even if you're not a developer, you can use the extension because you don't need the code, actually, to just spot the issues. So we can go further. You probably don't use Bootstrap, I know that, but you can reuse the ID. You can reuse the code, you can reuse the extension, you can adapt it, you can make it your own. It's open source, it's under MIT license, so you can pretty much do everything. I've got some ideas for you. Maybe if you have some spare time and you want to try out open source, you can create an extension for your design system library. I don't know, France Télévisions or other design system. You can create exactly the same thing for your components, or you can maybe do something to highlight the components that are from your library of components to spot if a button is really a button from your design system. You could add some features in the extension. You could have automatic issue creation. You spot an issue, you send something to Jira, you create something from that. You can, I don't know, make screenshot and then send them through a webhook to a Slack channel, I don't know. You can add links to the documentation for your developers because you can point to the documentation because you know the classes. You can add this extension to your recommendations in your company for all the developers that need to migrate, or in your migration guides. You could create a generic extension like mine, but for all the frameworks, maybe just having a JSON file that you can upload to the extension and highlight deprecated stuff for anyone. And maybe you can do the same thing in a Storybook add-on. Could be nice. So lots of ideas. Just wanted to say to conclude this talk that open source is code, but open source is also ideas, it's also community sharing, collaboration. Even if we can't share the code for legal reasons, etc., we can share some ideas all together in the design system community, in Storybook community, whatever. And I really hope that it's gonna inspire you to try to create your own tools, even if it's not perfect. You saw the design interface of my extension. It's not perfect. It works. That's okay. I mean, for a developer, it's already better than having a migration guide anyway. So yeah, you can apply that to your library, your design system, your favorite framework. Do whatever you want. And I hope that, yeah, together we can share, we can make the migration process easier for everyone. So thanks a lot. If you have any question.
Questions?
Perfect.
It's not a question, it was really, really inspiring.
Okay. Thank you for the feedback.
so the feedback is really, really inspiring, because especially how you close up, because I was really wondering how we could apply it outside Bootstrap, and you just made it, because you say, yay, let's share ideas, collaboration, and this is the base of the open source community mindset. So thank you so much for sharing. I love it, really, super cool.
Thank you very much.
I agree. The conclusion was I want to build stuff like you mentioned, but because I have to ask a question, how could you, because I remember doing a migration from an old version of Bootstrap to a newer one, and I remember that some classes were still there, but they were now used differently. Like the class name were the same, but they now had a different behavior. How would you show that to the user that, oh, you're using the class name, but not in the right way with the new version? How would you do that?
That's a really tricky one. The main problem that we have in Bootstrap and libraries like that is that we don't have black box components. So when I say black box, I mean an interface or whatever. In Bootstrap, you have basically a DOM HTML element that you can combine like you want. Basically, that's really, really free when you want to build something with Bootstrap. But this freedom has a cost. This cost is it's really difficult to know if you don't have automatic visual regression tools or whatever test. It's really difficult for you because you won't be aware of this change. And if you don't read the migration guide, I don't think you can have tools for that. Maybe just spot in the IDE an extension or whatever. Just say, okay, you've just migrated. Be careful. This class can be tricky. But this is maybe the only idea I have right now for this use case. But that's really what's complicated when you migrate CSS libraries, because the class or the cascading rows in CSS can be different. We have some examples with people having troubles with the newest version with the tables because they have nested tables. So every time you change the cascading style sheet CSS rules, it's gonna break something for someone. And if you don't check the tables, you don't check the migration guide, you won't even know. So yeah, I don't have a clear answer for that, but yeah, that's tricky.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other question?
All right, thank you. So this is it for us. We're gonna stop the live stream now. And I think we have food and drinks at the back of a room for the people who are here. And if you're on YouTube, well, yeah, I don't actually know how to switch the slides on this MacBook, so I'm not gonna do it. Thank you for attending, and yeah, hope you learned something useful, and we're looking forward to hearing about you on the Storybook Discord.
I do have one last message at the host here. The pizzas are not yet arrived. They will be here in about 10 to 15 minutes, but we already have some snacks and stuff. And if you need to leave, when you go downstairs by the elevator, the exit will be on the right. You arrived from the left, but the exit will be from the right down the elevator, just so you're sure. But thank you very much, and let's mingle and chat and drink and eat. Thank you very much.